Hello guys, I am here to make another dwarf talk. I am the Baboon Lord and you have been so kind as to ask a bunch of questions since our last dwarf talk. So I'll go through them and basically answer them. So the first question is from WilderQ and I'll read aloud the question. In one of your latest posts you said you are making the second map harder because of feedback. While I do agree that there needs to be challenging endgame content, I don't think making the second map harder is the correct choice. A better option, in my opinion, is making a third map that is way harder. You need steps of difficulty. So to my question, are your thoughts about that change for it to be a placeholder until you make a third map, and how do you want the progression difficulty to be? Thank you for making that question, WilderQ. So the answer I would say is that, it's not that easy to quickly answer, but I would say that we are intending to have like a progression curve in terms of difficulty from the sheer amount of feedback, which was more than 1,000 replies. There was a pretty common denominator there, suggesting that we could easily increase the difficulty on especially the second map. And our plan is to basically make the what we call tier 1 area in Wolfswood, so basically where you start and where you need to go to extract should be super hard. We are maybe even making that slightly easier. But wherever you are voluntarily taking more risks, such as going into a locked territory or joining the refinery map, for instance, we want it to be much more difficulty, so that you actually kind of have a lot of challenge for many hours that you need to train against, and we think that that's the better approach. We will also work on a third map, and yes, that will be even harder, but we do think that there is a room to make refinery overall harder, and probably also some areas on refinery even harder. Internally we talk about 4 difficulty steps: tier 1, 2, 3 and 4, and intended to have that, for instance, all of these on Wolfswood, but very few tier 4 territories. One of the later maps might mainly be tier 4, and the refinery might not have tier 1 difficulty, and so forth. So this is overall like how we think about it internally. Of course that can change, but hopefully that answers your question. Then we have another question from iWolfie. With the introduction of solo queue, are there any planned changes regarding the solo buff or solo potion giving 50% less damage if no teammates around? I think both shouldn't be used in solo queue, to be honest. And yes, I totally agree. So the thinking here is that we will eventually get rid of the loner potion and we will, for the next test, likely increase the solo buff, aka known as the lone wolf buff, for this particular test. And then we have something quite exciting coming up for the test after this that may greatly affect it all. So in the next upcoming test, it's a little bit more experimental, and we are going to touch on the lone wolf buff, and we might even get rid of the loner potion for it as well, because you're also getting a lot of the new activatable items that kind of impacts a lot how the potions in general work. Then we have a question from Cycle Waffle. What an awesome name. And the question is, what are your plans for future playtests planning? Are you going to keep similar cadence like last playtest to the upcoming one, or are they going to get more frequent or vice versa? Yeah, cool question. So we're not gonna like commit to a special cadence currently. I think what we're going to do is have slightly a longer time between the tests. I think we've had an average of a test every 5 to 7 weeks or so all of last year, and we wanted to carve out a few extra weeks to have a slightly bigger pack when we then do a test. And for the test coming after the one now here in April, it will likely also take an additional extra step, because we are making some humongous systems. However, that is also very exciting. So that is one of our most important tests that we are working towards, and we want to make sure that we deliver the things that we want before we actually do that test. So yeah, in other words, we are not committing to a specific test plan. In theory, how we work is that we want to constantly let you know when we're going to test again, so you know when that is, and we don't want to just have an empty void on when am I going to play again. Besides that, we generally want to do a test when we feel we have a huge increment for you to test. So that's the general principle. So then we have a question from Nero, or Nero. So the question is, not sure if you tell us, but were you positive about the player count, or did you expect it to be more? And I'm guessing this is in relation to our recent world reveal test. And I would say, yes, we were definitely happy. It was much more than what we had planned to or like targeted. So that was super great. It's also really nice to see, like, normally when you do a test, it can be a little bit harder to get a lot of players in when they have to jump through hoops and it's not just directly installable on Steam and things like that. So it was really, really cool to see that we got so many players, even though it wasn't just a direct download. I think I'm excited about the thought that had this been, for instance, in Steam Next Fest or something like that, it would have been probably a top 10 game, even though players had to go through a lot of these hoops. So that's I think a really great start on approaching bigger playtests. But yeah, not every playtest will have targets like this, and not all of them is something where we need or are trying to get tons of players in. It varies a little, and it will also vary depending on how many keys we distribute and so on. The next one here is Omega with some cool triangles. Yeah. And the question is, in the last playtest, I really wanted to move my camera height because I think it's really close to the character. In order to be more comfortable for me, will there be more camera configurations on the next playtest? Very good question. It's something we debate constantly internally, and we are constantly like making small adjustments to it. I think there may be the opportunity to zoom out slightly. Actually, if you didn't notice it in the last playtest, you could go to settings and go to the camera options in the general menu and switch it to camera panning or camera rotation. The camera rotation mode allowed you to zoom up a few percentages more. So maybe that's what you needed. If you weren't aware, please check that out in the next test, as it may solve your pain point. But we also have some ideas of how to work on camera movement for the future, so I'm quite excited to see what you think about that. But there's not as such a particular huge difference in the next upcoming test, besides you having the ability to again go in and check out the rotating camera. Then finally, the question is from Psycho Matt. Also kind of cool way to spell that. So any plans for a kind of arena PvP mode where you can make wagers against similarly geared squad players? You could wager anything from gold to armor to consumables. Very good question. I know some other extraction games are intermingling with arena PvP modes. We also talk quite a lot with some of the, you could say, very veteran streamers in the genres, and there was very mixed opinions on whether games or extraction games, for instance, should have arena modes. I think my personal view on it is that we should generally focus on the game embracing what it is, which is essentially an extraction game where a lot of the strategy comes from knowing what battles to take and when not to take it, and also hiding and being strategic of how to extract and so on. And generally, I don't think it fits so well to force players against each other in this genre. It's more about taking the good bets on when you want to fight and also planning for escape routes and so on. So I'd rather like to make the competition around a more strategic element. Of an example would be like who gets X item before anyone else and get out with it and so on. That would, in my mind, fit more of an extraction competitive layer. And I think we have something on the drawing board that embraces this. So I think that would be our first attempt on this and the more competitive part of the game, that we'd be excited to see what you think about beyond the arena mode. So yeah, it was super nice with all these questions. We'd basically like to take some of your questions once in a while here, so please do keep posting them. I hope maybe we could take them to Reddit or so people can like vote on what they think should be answered as a top priority in these videos, and let's see if we can do it like that. But I'm really happy that you care enough to actually post questions, so therefore we'd also like to answer them, and I hope you like these answers. Otherwise, bye bye.